Hey, this is LOA Today, the Law of Attraction show. Welcome to LOA Today. My name is Walt Thiessen. It's Thursday, April the 6th, 2017, and Joel Elston is off this week dealing with some personal matters. So to fill in the void, we have a blast from the past. My brother and sister-in-law, Mark and Uohna Thiessen, are here joining me as co-hosts, just kind of on a sitting-in basis this week. And Uohna, it's been a while since we've done this.
Yes, it has. It has been a while. Yeah, I have to admit, I've missed this.
It's kind of addictive. You get used to the fact that it's like your weekly positivity dose.
Yes, it does. It's like, your supplements that you take, once a week kind of thing.
That's right, yeah. Joel and I talk about how every week, no matter what kind of week we're having, we can always look forward to doing the show because it gives us that lift, So,
yes.
Yeah, I can understand what it's like to miss it. I can understand it so well that I didn't want to miss it. That's why I kept going with the show.
I see. So you had ulterior motives.
I certainly did. Oh, yeah, that's the main reason to do this. I mean, I love that we're talking to our audience. We've actually expanded since you've been on the show. When you were on the show, we were just on PRN. We're still on PRN, of course, but we now are on iTunes, and we've got our own feed on podcast feed on our website, and we're on Facebook, and we're on YouTube. So we've expanded a bit. Yeah. So life is good, So we started last week. Joel and I started talking about the book "The Secret" by Rhonda Byrne. We kind of touched on the basic concept, the basic premise of the law of attraction. Talked a little bit about the huge role that The Secret has played in bringing this whole concept of not just the law of attraction, but the power of positive thinking and so forth to the masses in a way that perhaps was a bit simplistic. I mean, the book and the movie are rather simplistic in their presentation, but nevertheless, it did succeed in breaking through and reaching, tens, hundreds of millions of people, which was a phenomenal achievement, really, when you think about it.
Yeah, marketing genius, that Rhonda Byrne. She was.
And she had some help, too. I actually had a conversation one time with the guy who did the social media to get The Secret off the ground.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
okay.
Interesting conversation. I won't go into the whole conversation because, surprisingly, it also had a negative side to it because it turns out that Rhonda Byrne doesn't actually follow the principles of the law of attraction with any degree of consistency because she didn't treat all of her her producer and her social media guy and others really well, but that's another story for another day.
Yes.
Because the good part is that it did go viral. It did become very popular, and through that popularity, well, among other things, that's how I found it. That's how I first discovered the law of attraction. I found The Secret long before I discovered Abraham Hicks or Mike Dooley or any of the others. Well, actually, Mike Dooley, I found him through The Secret. But, it played an important role in my life. So now I should also tell you guys, listeners will know this, that before The Secret, we actually spent the last 13, 14 episodes discussing Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich.
Oh, okay.
And that was such a satisfying set of episodes to do that we said, we got to keep doing this. We'll just keep doing book after book because it gives us so much to talk about.
That's great, yeah. That's a great way to have a schedule.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you remember what it's like anyway, because once you get going, you can talk about anything. But
I do.
But it's nice to have a little bit of structure there, and especially with the Hill book, we would go through chapter by chapter, and each week we felt like we were bringing up new material, even though it's basically the same material presented in 500 different ways, but it felt like it was new each time.
There's something to be said about there's a difference between reading a book, with just you and the book. But when you're discussing it with someone else, it takes on a whole level of life. It takes on a whole new appreciation for what's written, and you comprehend things differently. Talking about it out loud makes a difference because I know that I've read books by myself, and then Mark and I would read it together and talk about it, and it would be almost like a whole new book.
Yeah, Yeah, and that's the same thing that Joel and I noticed. We also noticed that there's a lot that we agree on, but every once in a while, there's a different perspective. He'll have one perspective, I'll have another, and it kind of fills in some gaps that you didn't even know were missing, which is cool.
Right, definitely, yeah.
Yeah, so pretty good stuff. So we're kind of out of sequence because Joel obviously can't do this week's show, so we're not going to really try to go through to do Chapter 2. I figured we could just kind of talk about how The Secret has influenced our lives.
Okay.
Because, among other things, you probably remember this, back in 2012, The Secret influenced us in a conversation. You were visiting Louise and I when we were living in Virginia, and we had that conversation around the dinner table, and we were talking about, wouldn't it be great to actually do a podcast about The Secret and about the law of attraction, which led to this show.
Right.
And I remember too, when we were doing that conversation, I had this yearning to do it because I figured that it would give me answers that I didn't have yet. Because at that time, I still didn't understand a lot of it. I mean, I understood on the surface what they were saying, but some of it just didn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Some of it I couldn't figure out how it could actually work. Some of it was just, it sounded woo-woo. I didn't even know the term woo-woo, but it sounded woo-woo.
Yeah, I understand that. I know. For me, my first encounter with The Secret was from when Rhonda appeared on the Oprah Winfrey Show.
Oh yeah, that was huge for the Oprah audience. That was a major event.
And I had this crazy, strange reaction because there was this intense interest, and at the same time, I was kind of leery of the whole thing because the way Rhonda presented and the way the movie, more so than the book, it made it look almost new agey and
very much
kind of, with my Christian background, it looked something on the other side, kind of
something satanic or something like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so it's like I wanted to know more, but then I didn't want to know anything. But yeah, I definitely remember that. And, as time went on, I was exposed to it more and more from different areas. And I did some of my own research, read the books, and then I read other books that talked about the same principles, but from a less kind of esoteric kind of approach. It was more practical, and even some appealed to my Christian background. So that made it a little bit more easy for me to accept it. But yeah, I remember. Do
you remember your breakthrough moment? Do you remember what it was that made you say, there's something here?
You know what? I don't, because it happened very gradually. It wasn't a major. I didn't have the aha moment. It was little by little. I think there was a lot of resistance there for whatever reason. Because I remember one lady, she had a copy of the book and she lent it to me, and I thought, oh my goodness, I don't want this book in my house. And then she gave me a copy of the DVD, and I thought I would only watch it if someone else is at home. It's very suspicious. But yeah,
I could just imagine the copy of the book sitting on your coffee table, just glaring at you.
Exactly. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, what did I do here? There were little things that I thought, okay, I can understand that, I can accept that, and then it would be something else that would happen, what I would learn, and I would say, okay, that makes sense. Oh, okay, yeah, that's true. Yes, I know that, I believe that, and more it would be, of course, my scientific background also helped me. My curiosity was piqued, and so I would read more and learn more, and then I would say, yeah, you know what, that is actually very true. And so it was a very gradual process. So
well, that makes sense, especially for you with your background. You mentioned the word resistance.
Yes.
And it's interesting that you should say that word, because I was thinking about that word earlier today. Maybe that becomes the subject of this week's show, because resistance is the one thing that The Secret doesn't really do a great job of discussing, but it does mention it. And resistance is the thing that stops you from succeeding with trying to apply the law of attraction in your life. because
Right.
and it's not necessarily resistance to the concept of the law of attraction. It's resistance to anything you're trying to attract.
Yes.
And the hardest part, I think, this is where I was stumbling very early on, and why I considered a lot of it to be that woo-woo thing was, well, if I'm not getting results that I'm expecting all the time, and if that's because of resistance, that's what the theory is, why can't I feel the resistance?
What do you mean you feel? You thought you would feel the resistance?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm resisting in some way, I should know it, shouldn't I?
I got you. I see what you're saying.
You know, I mean, it's not like I'm walking through life and I'm resisting but not realizing it. That's what was going through my mind. What I've learned since then is that's exactly what I've been doing, walking through life and resisting and not realizing I was doing it. But that seemed preposterous.
Yes, I understand that. Yeah, because then there's the whole issue of the subconscious.
Oh yeah, yeah. The subconscious mind is a terrible thing to waste.
Yes.
But more than that, it is amazing how the subconscious mind, through the programming that we get from our environment, through our growing up years, into our adult years, into our later adult years, just keeps piling up all this stuff that we accumulate, a lot of it negative, and that negativity just keeps resonating and resonating. It's like the analogy of the tape that keeps playing over and over and over again.
Right.
And that's where the resistance comes in.
Yes,
But since it's subconscious, we don't realize it's actually there.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's the thing that makes it so difficult to you know, for a lot of people to accept the whole law of attraction, because they have a theoretical acceptance of it, right? And so then they expect all this magic to happen, but it doesn't. And then they say, well, then it can't be true because, you know, here I now think positively and things are still going badly for me. And of course, there's the whole subconscious programming, you know. And now I think of it as if, you know, with my scientific background, if you have a beaker of this very acidic solution and you're trying to turn that acidic solution to an alkaline or to a base, you know, it's going to take more than a drop of a basic solution in that beaker to change that, you know. And so it's going to take what we call in the chemistry world a titration, as it were. And that's going to be drop by drop by drop by drop. Because we have this experiment that I don't know how much you remember from your chemistry days, where you'd have this thing and they had the indicator and you drop it in and it'll give you this flash of pink, but then it goes away.
Right.
And then you have
pH strips. I remember those.
Yeah, exactly. And you have to keep, you know, adding. And the same thing with your conscious, your psyche. You have to keep exposing yourself to the this new way of thinking over and over and over again before you have the change on the subconscious level, right? Before you can actually then really you know, feel like it's actually become a part of your life now.
And meanwhile, while you're doing that, your subconscious is continuing to play those negative tapes. I mean, it doesn't just stop because you started thinking positively. Those tapes continue to play. So you can start your day with some affirmations, and they're very positive. And then when you're consciously thinking about being positive, you're positive. And then the rest of the day, you're doing your other stuff, and all those tapes start playing again.
Right, exactly.
And so it's this constant, you know, tennis match going back and forth between, okay, I'm consciously, positively focused. Now I'm going to go back to doing what I was doing, and the tape starts playing again. And at some point, you want to reach into your head and find the off switch.
Yes, exactly. And that's one of the things, like you were saying, that The Secret didn't do a good job of emphasizing. And they did highlight the need for visualization, which helps. It makes a great deal of difference. But as we discovered, you know, the four of us, you and me and Walt and Louise, that the emotions are key. But it was never stressed in the book or in the video.
Well, it was mentioned. I mean, we can't say it wasn't mentioned, and it was mentioned repeatedly. I think what happened was that because The Secret was told like a story, right. like it was this. I mean, it was entitled The Secret, and the premise of it was that the secret had been suppressed for years by the most successful people because they didn't want to share it with the rest of the world and so forth. And so it just kept evolving as this emerging secret that, oh my goodness, this is being withheld from the masses and so forth. So even if you do mention the importance of emotion in that, it gets lost in the story. I think that's what really happened.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because we read the book, we saw the movie, and they did talk about the emotions, but that didn't register.
It was in the background. But the emotions are very useful. That's the one thing that we have learned over time, because the emotions tell us when we are in alignment with what some people call our other selves, or our true selves, or our higher selves, or the selves on the other side, or the other side of the rainbow, whatever you want to call it. But
and I've learned from other authors that I've read that the emotions are connections to our subconscious. It's the way our subconscious communicates to us, and as well as in the other direction, how we communicate back to our subconscious through our emotions.
That's a good point, because ultimately what we're really trying to learn is how to talk nicer to ourselves.
Exactly.
And the more that we learn to do that, and the more consistently we're able to pull that off, that's that titration that you're talking about, reaching its break-even point, where we're now at pH 7.
Exactly, and hopefully get it to higher numbers.
Yeah, right. But the other thing that is fascinating about The Secret is when you try to apply it, and you get, sometimes for certain things you get good results, sometimes you get great results, sometimes you don't get any results. And especially early on, that is so confusing.
Yeah.
How could that be,
Well, I think one of the main things is that, for me, I've come to understand that there are always going to be results we want and results we don't want, But it's a matter of our attitude towards those results. That's what makes the difference. Because what tends to happen, pre The Secret and LOA, when we get positive results, we're like, oh, great, this is wonderful. And we go on with our lives. When we get negative results, oh my goodness, the response is over the top. The world is coming to an end. Nobody likes us. We are victims, and life is so hard, and we go on for days and weeks and months reacting emotionally to these negatives. So we're sending out these strong, powerful signals. And that's what tends to accumulate in our lives, because, again, the emotions are so powerful. But when we learn that, one, we are in control of our emotions, and two, that our attitude and our response to the things that happen in our lives makes a whole lot of difference. So even when things don't turn out quite the way that we expect them to, how we respond to it will determine whether we get more of those kinds of things or more of the, quote, more positive results that we want. And so it's learning to, kind of temper our emotions to then get us what we want, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think it does. It reminds me of back when you and I were doing the show together, and Mark would sometimes sit in too, and we would talk about where you guys were at. At that point, you guys were kind of on a high plane. You were really riding it high. Right. And Joel is currently on a similar plane right now. Things are going so well in his life. And the common factor that comes through in my discussions with Joel compared to the discussions with you a few years back is that when the things are going well, when things go badly, they slide by quicker. You don't pay as much attention to them. You don't give them the energy. And it's just they're almost non-events even when they happen. We don't go into that big emotional, roller coaster ride when, things are going bad, because that's not the way you're feeling when you're in that good high position.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And so it's kind of a growth, a maturity in the process that happens, and it's almost it's kind of like a rite of passage, because, we've been programmed to think and react a certain way for all our lives. And now here comes this new approach. And so, we're going to be tested, to see, and I hate to use that term, because then it seems like someone's testing us, but it's more like our resolve, our conviction is being assessed by the universe. And so when the negative things happens, yes, now we are, we're going to say, okay, do I really believe this whole LOA thing, or am I just like using it as a crux to kind of make me ignore life, as it were?
Well,
but yeah.
Plus, Joel likes to really emphasize the value of struggle.
Yes.
I take it that's a yes.
Yes. That's one of the most important lessons I think Mark and I have learned.
Yes, I'm here, and I agree, and that was an eye opener for me.
Yes.
Yeah, I didn't mean to completely eliminate my brother from the conversation. I just know that you're usually pretty quiet, and usually you want to talk. So I'm sorry I didn't bring you in before now, but I'm glad you joined us. Thank you for joining us on the show, and thank you for spouting out there, because this is a key point. The whole idea of struggle being a negative is what trips us up.
Yes, absolutely.
Right. The moment that we turn struggle into a belief that this is the greatest thing that happened, that this is a wonderful turning point. This is where we finally hit bottom, and now it's all going to be up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just changing the way we look at it makes all the difference in the world.
Makes a whole lot of difference. And the thing is, I should have gotten this lesson earlier, because I know from my scientific background, especially in the world of biology, just how beneficial struggle is to life. Like all of life is enhanced by struggle. Growth and development and advancement and enhancement and everything positive comes as a byproduct of struggle. And I shouldn't say byproduct; it's almost the main thing that happens as a result of struggle. And struggle it's intended to make these wonderful things happen. Like when you exercise, you stress your muscles, and there's a breakdown, quote unquote, and there's some tearing and some damage and struggle, but then life responds and repairs those muscles, and the muscles are now bigger and stronger than they were before the struggle. And it's not just with muscles, there are other things like the brain, the heart, the lungs. They all respond positively to struggle. And all life that we know, except for humans who actually think too much, they have a different approach to struggle. They see it as something beneficial and something necessary. But for some reason, we were brought up with the idea that you shouldn't struggle, and struggle is adverse, and struggle is, something bad and negative. And if you're struggling, then you must have done something wrong to bring this upon yourself, and all that kind of nonsense. But, I've come to realize just how wonderful struggle is. In fact, there was a line in the movie that Mark and I saw, and the guy, someone asked him about the struggle, and he responded, with this, not these exact words, but he said, "Oh, the struggle is beautiful." And I thought, wow. And so I've tried to make that kind of the motto for my life. The struggle is beautiful.
That's good. It reminds me of a story, a parable, if you will. I think it may actually be a Buddhist story, but I'm not 100% sure of that. But it's a story of a boy who had found a cocoon, and he went to a wise man of the village and showed it to him. And the wise man said, "Well, if you're willing to protect the cocoon and keep it safe from predators, but promise not to interfere with it, you can keep it, and you can learn how the cocoon transforms the insect that made the cocoon into a new form of insect." And so the boy was all excited about that, and he went off with the cocoon. And the day came very soon where the cocoon started to break open, and he saw there was a butterfly inside, and the butterfly was trying to get out. And the butterfly was struggling so hard, and the boy just was overcome by it. He had to let him out. So he ripped the cocoon open, and the butterfly came out, but within a day it had died.
Yeah.
And the boy was just crestfallen. He went to the wise man and he explained what happened. The wise man said, well, you didn't do what I asked you to do. You broke the cocoon open. What you didn't realize is the butterfly needs to strengthen its wings by beating the cocoon open. Otherwise, it cannot survive. You denied it the opportunity to survive.
That's a beautiful story.
Yeah, and there's a great example of where struggle is actually vital to life and death.
Yes, absolutely.
And not in a way where it's one person struggling against another and who's going to kill who. That's not the kind of struggle we're talking about. We're talking about a struggle of trying to find your own wings, trying to find your own muscles in life. And the same thing applies to trying to learn a concept as challenging as the law of attraction. Because it seems to defy what our experience has taught us growing up. We picked up a lot of stuff from parents, from teachers, from friends, from adults we respected, and a lot of the stuff doesn't really work the way it was promised to work, and it goes contrary to what the law of attraction teaches us. So it's challenging, and we have to kind of struggle with that for a bit. But if we stick with it, which I've done, which you've done, which Joel has done, which a lot of people have done, and you just keep trying to figure out how does this work and trying to apply it and so forth, over time, our wings get stronger.
Yeah.
The life or death issue is what really resonated with me. When I became aware of that, not too long ago, like in the last couple of years, and I realized that for most of my life, I had been resisting this idea of struggle as being necessary to life, and I thought the secret to happiness and success and all was finding happiness and success without struggle. And when I realized the opposite was true, and I started really exploring it, I came to realize that struggle is growth, that it's required for growth. But I also realized that struggle and growth are versus not struggling and growing are the difference between life and death. And when I first thought about that, I thought, well, that's rather, over the top. But then I realized, that really is true. There's just this time lag that when we're not struggling, we're not growing, we're just sort of coasting. You could also say that we're on this coast toward death at that point.
Yep.
Because it's like having muscles and not using them. They're going to atrophy.
Yeah.
You have to keep using. You have to keep struggling with the muscles. Even if you're not a bodybuilder, you still need to do that.
You work and resist something.
Yeah.
Which Joel is, by the way. He is a bodybuilder.
Oh, okay.
Very good.
In fact, his favorite thing to deal with, petty stresses in his life is to go to the gym, and he does it all the time.
Yeah. I want to add two things. One, I think part of the problem is that we grew up with parents or adults in the society who were exactly like that little boy who tried. They saw us. They thought their job was to prevent us from suffering.
Right.
And so they did everything in their power to prevent that from happening, even though they weren't successful. But they thought that that's what they were supposed to do. And so we grew up thinking that then if we suffered, it's because our parents did a poor job, or we're just victims. And the other thing I think is that we were not taught the difference between struggling and suffering.
That's another thing that Joel likes to talk about, actually.
Yes. There is a difference, and I didn't realize that. Of course, theoretically, I knew that there was a difference in the definition of the word, but in my mind, I equated them in terms of life experience. I thought suffering meant struggling, and struggling meant suffering. But I realized, and even when I met Mark, I remember he had an adverse to struggle and suffering because he was he would talk about what's that book? That book that was like the Bible.
Oh, the one I've been reading a lot. Yes, the Course in Miracles.
Course in Miracles.
Oh,
and
right, yeah.
And they often talked about the fact that that you should avoid suffering, or life should not entail suffering, or something to that effect. Right, but it's
something like that.
Right, But so we equated that with struggle, so there should be no struggle, there should be no suffering, and if you follow your bliss, there will be no suffering. But the thing is, that's true, and suffering is a choice.
Suffering is definitely a choice.
A choice, yes. And it's not one and the same with struggling, and I had to learn that by experience and actually come to the place where I made the decision that I would not suffer through my struggle, that I could struggle and not suffer, that I could struggle and actually even enjoy the struggle. And I've learned that. And it's funny because I used to understand that in my physical world, because like I used to share with you, I loved running, and I would run for these long periods, and I would feel, exhausted in my body, and everything was really giving it all, and it was hard, and I was struggling, and I loved it. But then when it came to the other aspects of my life, I thought, oh my goodness, I shouldn't have to struggle. That's not. But now I know, I understand how it's actually very similar. So.
Well, that's where the concept of competition really comes in. For most people, competition is competing with somebody else.
Right.
But really, the most effective form of competition is with yourself.
With yourself.
Trying to exceed what you have previously gotten to. Mm-hmm. And in that sense, that's where the struggle really comes in. Most of the time, actually, what we deal with, there really is no struggle going on except what's going on in our heads. Mm-hmm. We're not living in an age, most of us, certainly most of those people who are listening to this podcast, we're not living in an age where life is a day-to-day struggle for survival where you may not make it through the day. You may be dead by the end of the day. There are people around the world who have that, but the vast majority of people do not live that way. So struggle for most people becomes much more of a cerebral thing. It's usually not so much a physical life or death kind of struggle.
Yes.
And yet that concept is where people trip up. So we talked earlier about resistance and the role that resistance plays. Resistance to the idea of struggling is one form of resistance. Another form of resistance is resistance to the idea that the law of attraction can work for you. That's a big one. Resistance to the idea that the law of attraction works, period.
Right.
Resistance to the idea that there is connection that is metaphysical. That's a huge one. And it can be huge for somebody either who has no metaphysical beliefs, or to someone who is very religious, or to people who have different views from the rest of society. I mean, there's a lot of different ways you can resist that kind of component. There's resistance. I mean, there's so many different ways we can resist this thing. So, early on, I was wondering where my resistance was coming from, and I really didn't know. I couldn't feel it. I couldn't sense it. So where could it be? Over time, I've become aware that there's all kinds of ways I've been resisting this thing. So the real challenge, the real competition, the real struggle is learning to overcome my own thought process that's holding me back.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, because before you realized that, you had resistance, you didn't realize that there are so many ways that you can actually, be in resistance, as it were. But once you become aware of that, then they kind of just all start opening up to you and allow you the opportunity to let go of that resistance, and then actually make that transition from, a non-LOA type of life to one that actually realizes just how much control you have over the things that happen to you.
How do I resist thee? Let me count the ways.
Well, there's a challenge for you if I ever heard one. The whole thing about resisting and about learning how to overcome that resistance has been the theme of my own journey, for sure, with exploring the law of attraction and exploring how to stretch myself in life. One of the things that I have marked for myself, I guess, that I think maybe separates me from many other humans is struggle where societal negativity comes in. And by societal negativity, I mean the fact that there is so much negativity in society in general. There's, the news is almost 100% negative. Politics, certainly 100% negative. Entertainment at least 90% negative, maybe more. I mean, you go through the major segments of society, and it's negativity after negativity after negativity. And I have reached a point where I can't even tolerate that much negativity. On the other hand, one of the main points that The Secret makes, that teachers of the law of attraction make, that teachers of positive thinking make, is that it is essential to have the negative side, because by knowing what the negative is, it gives you a beacon, if you will, a transponder of the direction you don't want to go in. It gives you an opposite to move away from. And I can, at least to some degree now, accept the idea that while all the negativity that's out there is not for me, I don't really want it, I can at least appreciate the idea that other people find it useful. Now, personally, I kind of believe that a lot of people spend an awful lot more time on the negative stuff than they really need to, but I'm more and more getting to the point of just accepting that that's what they feel is best for them, and God bless them, because it's not best for me.
Yeah, I think for me it has been one of the things, it's something that I deal with too, the negativity that's out there in social media and in the media in general. But one of the things I know that I have grown in that I don't react to it like I used to, because I used to really get involved in it but more than just get involved in it, I would react to it, and I would let it bring me down and make me feel depressed or sad or frustrated or angry or whatever it is. Now I don't feel those things at all, and so I know that I can be aware of it without being drawn into it. And I know that's not everyone else's experience. But the other thing that, like you were saying, it also helps me to appreciate the difference, the distinction. Because like you were saying, that there's, we know that there is suffering out there, and there are a lot of people who have really horrible lives. But I am reminded just how wonderful my life is, not that I look at them and say, oh, my life is so much greater. But it reminds me of just how blessed I am. And it reminds me not to take this amazing life that I have for granted, and it reminds me that, things could be different, and I'm grateful that they are not. And it also reminds me that I have a responsibility to do something about it, not to, fight this and that kind of stuff, but to, in my own way, whether it is to send thoughts of love and good vibrations to the people that need it, but just in my own world with the people around me, to make sure in some small way I'm contributing to the positive that does exist in the world.
I'm curious what kinds of strategies you use to fend off the negativity. Like, for instance, Joel and I, over the past year, we both have pretty much shut off paying any attention to the news, because we realize just how toxic it is. And with really positive results. I mean, it's probably the best thing that happened to me last year, 2016, was to not pay any attention to the American presidential election, which is not what most people were doing. But I was just not, I mean, I was aware of it. You couldn't really not be aware of it. But I was so peripherally aware of it that it didn't even touch me. And I'm hearing all these stories of people freaking out, either on the pro-Trump side or the pro-Clinton side or the anti-Trump side or the anti-Clinton side. And I was just oblivious to it. It didn't make any difference to me. So my strategy in that case was just avoidance. I'm not going to include that in my life. Right. But I'm curious, what kinds of strategies have you used to block out the negativity that you don't want entering in your subconscious mind?
Well, interestingly, like I said before, I don't get emotionally drawn into it like I used to, because I remember when President Obama was elected, and there were all these negative things being said about him as the first African American president. I took it all personally as a black woman, and I felt very strongly about it. And then when they would say things about Michelle Obama, I would it's as if they were talking about me. I Oh,
It's so easy to personalize it.
yeah, it is very much so. And so, but now I'm almost like standing outside of it, observing it, and to me, it's almost like an episode of Saturday Night Live.
Well, it is. So
Yeah.
much of it is comic.
Exactly. It's so very comical, and I laugh at most of it, and so I don't even. I don't. There's nobody I really talk to about it except Mark. I would say, guess what Trump did today? This is so funny. You won't believe it. Or I would, before I would like get involved politically and share things on my Facebook page, which I don't do anymore unless like it's something I feel very strongly about that people need to be aware of. That's not neither here nor there. Like today I shared a video about what's happening in Syria, because even though it's a negative video, I feel that people need to be aware, and that's because I feel that they need to be aware so that when there are those who are speaking in support of the Syrian people, they understand why. But personally, I tend not to get drawn into it, and like I said, I don't have a strategy as such, except that it always reminds me to be grateful for my life. So I don't know.
That is a strategy, really. I mean, it reminds me of what Louise and I have talked about a few times on the rare occasions where we have talked about President Trump. It really just could apply to anybody who's a major politician, but it really does especially apply to Trump. You'll see why in a moment. Louise's theory is that if no one paid any attention to Trump, he would self-destruct.
Right.
Because his entire public persona is all about gaining attention.
Right.
And so we were kind of laughing over the fact that if his major opposition would just stop paying any attention at all, he'd probably have a nervous breakdown.
Yeah.
If you think about it,
Yep.
Which is comic relief in itself, just thinking about that. And if you're a Trump supporter, well, that actually is good for you, because that means that's the one thing that Trump supporters feel. Oh, he's so badly misunderstood and abused by his opponents and so forth. Well, if they stop, then the Trump supporters would be happy too. So everybody would be happier.
Yep, it's a win-win. Yeah.
But it does illustrate just how there are numerous kinds of strategies you can take to get to the place of accepting what's out there and not getting all worked up about it, and really having and gaining control over your own choice about what you're going to focus on. Because really that's what this is all about. This is all about trying to figure out how you're going to keep your own mind on the things that you want and off the things you don't want.
Yeah, because when Mark gets home and we're sharing about our day, and I've asked him what he did and what did I do, and I'll talk about what I worked on, what I accomplished, and he'll share what he's working on at work and that kind of stuff, and then kind of for comic relief, I'll say, well, this is what's happening in the news today, and then that it'll probably take 5 minutes, if that much, of our conversation, and then we move on to, isn't this life wonderful? Isn't it great to live in Florida? And that's kind of how it is, and that's taken growth for me to get to that place, because the old me would have been very much worked up about all that's happening, because I used to be very passionate about all this political stuff and women's rights and blah blah and all that kind of stuff.
Joel has a really interesting strategy that he implements to deal with this stuff, particularly because he's the one who first started avoiding the news. He started last May or so, and then I picked it up in July or thereabouts. When he started, he had been a news junkie. He listened to his news broadcast every morning as he had his cup of coffee and his breakfast and got dressed and so on and so forth. And he didn't want to give up that habit. But he didn't want to listen to the news because, he was trying to get away from that negativity. So what he did instead was very creative. He discovered that, and many people probably know this, that if you go to YouTube and you play a video that you want to play, in his case, he would pick somebody who was a positivity guru and play their video. YouTube will try to show you more of the same video.
Right.
So he'll just put YouTube on, and he'll just play it over his speakers, and it'll just give him one positive talk after another as he's getting ready for his day. So he found a way to replace the news with just YouTube positivity talks.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, it was a good strategy, and it worked really well. It worked so well that he does it to this day.
Wow.
Yeah. And I actually tried it. Now, I can't say it actually worked for me, because I found that a number of the positivity gurus aren't as positive as I would like them to be. They tend to get off onto these tangents that I really don't care about. So that approach didn't work for me, but it did work for him. And that's the point. The point is he found a technique that would work for him to accomplish the goal that he needed to accomplish of changing his mindset. And that's really what it's all about anyway.
Definitely. Because we're trying to overcome years and years of programming that,
One of the cool things, too, is learning that through this process, we become our own programmers. That's a very empowering idea.
Yeah.
Because it means that we're not we're not prisoners of our own emotional scale.
Yeah.
We actually can control. That was a big breakthrough for me. I don't know if you remember that, Uohna, but
yes, I remember.
Do you? Okay. Yeah, it was a big breakthrough, recognizing that I could actually change my emotions. And now I've gotten fairly good at it. I can move my emotions like 3 or 4 degrees on the scale almost on demand. Not every time, but most of the time I can if I really, really want to. But there was a time for most of my life where I didn't think it was possible.
Yeah, I remember you sharing when you came. You had that realization and how drastic that was for you, which was kind of alarming for me because I was never as far to the other extreme as you were. I always kind of knew that emotions were something I could play with, kind of, but I didn't have the full understanding that I was in complete control of it. So
yeah, it's a weird kind of control too, because we aren't really controlling the emotions; we're controlling how we're choosing to react, which is not quite the same thing. It's certainly related, because if you choose to react in a positive way, you tend to have a positive emotion. But it's not actually controlling your emotions. Controlling your emotions can actually be a negative thing. You can actually just bury them. That's a form of control. Not necessarily the best kind of control to have. The better kind is simply allowing yourself to explore them and to express them, and then focus on good stuff so you can feel the good emotions.
Yeah.
Do you guys do the 3 gratitudes every day?
No, we kind of dropped off on that.
Because that's something Louise and I have been doing now for a couple of years, and that
really,
is
you still do that?
Yeah, we still do it. We do it. We don't do it every night, but almost every night we do it. And it's really a wonderful way to refocus yourself for sleep.
Yeah.
Because just by you can even go to bed, with all this negativity on your mind from various stuff that happened in the day, and just by taking the time to refocus that way, all of a sudden the whole day takes on a whole new texture. Yeah. Because we have a tendency to skip over the good things that happen during the day.
Yep.
It's just a normal human thing. Well, I wouldn't say normal. It's normal in the sense that that's what society has trained us to do, but it's common. That's what I guess the better word than normal. But it's a very common reaction to just, look at the negative stuff that happened on the day because that's what we're so obsessed with. Well, refocusing and saying, you know what, there were a lot of good things that happened today just changes the whole tenor of it. And one of the interesting theories I heard through the Abraham Hicks people, through Esther Hicks, is that sleep is a period of time for readjusting your balance. Mm-hmm. Well, what better way to readjust the balance than to change your perspective of how your day went before you go into the mode of readjusting your balance?
Yeah, that's very powerful.
It's amazingly powerful. So, yeah, this whole thing, this whole exploration of law of attraction and how it works in our lives, it's become almost all-consuming.
Which it should be, really. I wanted to say that when you were talking about realizing that you have control of your emotions, and you were trying to explain that it's not just like this mechanical control of your emotions, I realized what it really is that you're no longer actually controlled by your emotions.
Yeah, there's that too. That's a big part of it. You're not controlled by those tapes that are playing in your subconscious mind.
Exactly, because you think that if you, sometimes your subconscious is reacting and you feel this way, and then you just go with that feeling, and it stays with you all day, and it colors everything you do and say for the rest of the day, which then of course affects the next day and so on, kind of thing. But now you're realizing, oh no, you can actually break that chain, and you don't have to let it go on.
You don't have to go with the emotion. You can just say, oh, you can experience it and then let it go.
Right. Yeah. It's not always as easy, but
no, but that's it's a skill.
It is, but we are learning and we're getting better and better at every day.
Mark, do you have a particular strategy you use when you need to get yourself off of a negative track and onto a positive track?
Mainly just being aware of it. As soon as a thought comes up and the accompanying negative emotion that it triggers, my habit now is just to be aware that, oh, that's what's happening. Sort of like splitting my mind. It happens immediately now. It's like, oh, there's a negative thought with it's an old memory. And actually there's something I learned about old memories that trigger negative emotions, is that with a little practice, you can make those memories stop triggering the negative emotions. And just,
And what technique do you use to do that? Because that is actually a teaching from The Secret and from many Law of Attraction teachers, but I'm curious to know what technique you use to do that.
I guess more often than not, I'll think about it from an outside perspective, like I'm somebody else. And what is that? It's hard. I haven't put it into words in a long time. So it's looking at the story, whatever that memory was, and looking at it, I guess trying to be objective about it, and thereby separating myself from it. Once I can do that, then the emotions start subsiding, and then I can look at it and even look at other ways of looking at it, perhaps positively. But even if I don't get there, I can still release the negative connection.
The work, question the story.
One of the hardest concepts for me was learning the idea that you can actually change the story.
Yes.
That you can create a new fiction that's a more positive fiction, and train your subconscious mind to believe the fiction in place of what was happening in the past that was so negative. That was a hard one for me to buy into, and I'm still struggling with it. There's that word again. Still struggling with it, but I have been trying to apply it, and I have to admit it does work.
Yes, it does.
Oh, and one thing that I realized with some of these stories is that they are connected with a time of my life, or with a person in my life, and by recognizing that these negative stories are a small part of those episodes in my life, which is easy to forget, then I can see that, oh, wait a minute, there was actually a whole bunch of good stories I can recollect about that period of time in my life. And if I focus on that and I let myself enjoy those happy memories, then I can glance back at the negative story and see that, oh, that was a small thing. And that makes it so much more tolerable and really eases the negative emotions associated with that little story.
That's kind of like applying three positive things on a time scale basis rather than within a single day. Because three positive things is taking, extracting three good things that happened out of your day, so you can replace your focus on the bad things that happened during the day and focus instead on the good things. Well, you're doing the same thing, but you're doing it on a wider scale of time. That's all.
Yeah, and you were talking about recoloring, reshaping, retelling the story. That has been proven both with research psychology as well as neuroscience, that when something happens to you and you fire particular neurons, that's kind of how the memory is created. And sometimes what happens when you are remembering the story, other neurons get fired, and then they become associated with the story, even though was not part of the original story. And so these stories can be rewritten, and they become the true story. And so they know that these things happen. That's why now they've changed certain laws about people giving testimonies, especially children, of things that happened to them many, many years ago, because they might really believe that something happened when really it didn't. And so you can recreate the memory. It's possible. And so we use that to our advantage in the law of attraction, in that we can actually change what we think happened to something else. In fact, what we might be remembering about the story may not be actually what happened at all.
Which is a fascinating thing.
Yes, it is. The other thing I wanted to talk about was the fact that our psyche is based. It's created. This whole idea of focusing on the negative is part of our survival mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
Because we were created that way, to focus on the things that were life-threatening. Because then, if we focused on that, it increased the chance that we would avoid it the next time, and increased our chances of survival.
And of course, the trick is reminding ourselves consciously that we don't have to stay in that mode at all times.
Right. But see, the thing is that a lot of times, what we interpret as being threatening or, destructive or harmful usually isn't. As we were mentioning earlier, it's our interpretation of the thing. The whole idea of struggle versus suffering is more something that happens mentally than actually in our reality, in our physical world. It's more happening in our minds, in our psyche, that we think that it's that we're suffering, when really we're the ones creating the suffering because of our attitudes and our perceptions of the way things are, and the way we think people are thinking about us, and blah, 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 and the whole host of that. And so we tend to focus on these things because we want to avoid them the next time. But if we can also retrain ourselves to make our focus on more on the positive side and less on the negative side. And then the other thing I wanted to say lastly was that both Abraham Hicks as well as Eckhart Tolle, they stressed the idea that the point of awareness is the point of power. Because a lot of times, the moment you become aware of that habit, the train of thought, the negative perception, whatever it is, the feelings, the moment you become aware of it, sometimes that's all it takes for it to just go poof.
That's true.
That's the scientific term, poof. It's very valid, though. There's no doubt about it. We only have a few minutes left here, so we can't go too far into it. But this whole idea of the focus, it's very much of an immediate thing. And in that immediacy, we have total choice, total power.
Yes.
And it's a power that cannot be taken away from us. It's ours forever. It's ours beyond our lives, actually, our lives on this earth. And the ability to focus in that way and to select what we're going to pay attention to gives us more power than we need from any other source. That is the power. That is the one.
Yes, it is.
And that's the one that, of course, the law of attraction is based on. I think I just wanted to spend on the last minute just touching on the thing that kind of kicked me into gear where the whole secret thing was concerned. When I started applying it to the concept of the Heisenberg uncertainty principle and quantum physics, and realizing that it was possible for a human mind to affect where an electron went. The first time that I heard that, I didn't believe it. The second time I rejected it. The third time I said, what? Until I finally realized that changes everything. That changes all of the pre-secret, pre-law of attraction beliefs that I had, because if the mind can affect that, then the mind can affect anything.
Anything.
And and it's just a question of us learning how to do it, which is why we do this podcast.
Absolutely.
It's a lot of fun, too.
Yeah, we just shifted some electrons as we spoke.
I saw them. They went right off the screen. It was amazing. Hey, Mark Uohna, thank you for sitting in with me this week. Kind of on an emergency basis. Joel was called away. He'll be back next week. But it was great because it was like, what we did 2 years ago. It was wonderful.
Yes, it was. Thank you so much. It was fun.
We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.